The Zalthari warships cut through the darkness of space like predators stalking prey. Their sleek hulls reflected starlight as they moved in perfect formation toward the Vega sector. Inside the flagship, Admiral Kreshtar watched his tactical screens with satisfaction. This sector belonged to humanity, but not for much longer. Admiral, we're detecting unusual readings ahead, his sensor officer announced, multiple eyes focusing on the display. Kreshtar approached the holographic projection. His mandibles clicked together in curiosity. Show me. The image materialized before them. 17 massive ships hung in the void, arranged in a precise military formation. But something was wrong with them. Their hulls were scorched black, pitted with age. Not a single running light blinked across their surfaces. They looked dead. Are those human vessels? Kreshtar asked. Yes, Admiral, but their power cores are completely cold. No energy signatures whatsoever. Our database suggests they're at least 200 years old. The bridge crew gathered around the display, examining the ancient warships. They were enormous things, built with the brutal simplicity of early space combat. Thick armor plating covered every surface. Massive gun batteries protruded from their flanks like the spines of some prehistoric beast. But everything about them screamed obsolete. Look at those weapons. One officer chittered with amusement. Kinetic cannons. Can you imagine? They actually shot pieces of metal at each other. Laughter rippled through the bridge. The Zalthari had moved beyond such primitive technology centuries ago. Their ships used quantum shields that could disperse energy weapons before they even made contact. These human relics didn't even have basic void shielding. They're museum pieces, another officer observed. The humans must have left them here and forgotten about them. Sentimental fools. Kreshtar studied the derelicts more carefully. The formation they held was still militarily sound, even after all these years. Someone had positioned these ships with purpose. But for what? To guard a sector with dead ships? It made no sense. Run a complete structural analysis, he ordered. I want to know everything about these vessels. The scans came back within minutes. The results only reinforced what they already suspected. Ancient reactor designs that modern engineers would laugh at. Armor that relied on thickness rather than advanced composites. Computers that probably ran on circuits rather than quantum processors. These ships were fossils. Admiral, there are 3 human colonies in this sector, the navigation officer reported. Small settlements. Total population roughly 8 million. And their defensive fleet? 2 patrol frigates and a handful of system defense ships. Nothing that poses any threat to us. Kreshtar made his decision. The Dominion needed the resources this sector offered. The minerals alone would fuel their expansion for a decade, and humanity was too stretched thin across their territory to respond quickly. By the time any real Terran fleet arrived, the Dominion would have fortified positions around all 3 colonies. Those derelicts aren't worth our time, Kreshtar announced. Leave the scout ship Whisper behind to catalog them for salvage. The rest of the fleet will proceed to establish orbital positions over the colonies. What if they contain anything valuable, Admiral? Kreshtar's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species. Then we'll strip them for parts after we've secured the sector. Ancient human technology might fetch decent prices from collectors. Now, execute the order. The Dominion fleet began moving forward, their powerful engines pushing them deeper into human territory. Only the small scout ship remained behind, beginning its methodical scans of mysterious derelicts. Inside the scout ship, the crew treated their assignment as a joke. They took holos of themselves posing in front of the dead human warships. They made bets about what ancient junk they'd find inside when salvage teams eventually cut through the hulls. One officer even suggested they could turn the ships into tourist attractions. None of them noticed a faint reading that appeared on their screens for just a fraction of a second, a pulse of energy so small, so brief, that their sensors dismissed it as background radiation. It cycled through the lead derelict, the one their database identified as UNSC Indomitable, then passed the next ship and the next, rippling through all 17 vessels in sequence. It was barely noticeable, just a heartbeat in the darkness. A signal that something old and patient had finally detected what it had been waiting for. A tripwire had been crossed. A threshold had been breached. Deep within the indomitable, in spaces that hadn't seen light in over a century, something ancient opened its eyes. Systems that had been sleeping since before most of the Zalthari crew were born began their wake-up sequence. Slowly, carefully, silently, the Ghost Fleet had been found. And now, the Ghost Fleet was waking up. The bridge of the UNSC Indomitable had been dark for 147 years. Dust floated through the air in the zero gravity. Command chairs sat empty, their leather cracked with age. The main view screen was black. Everything was silent and still, like a tomb floating in space. Then something changed. A single light flickered on the main console. Then another. Then a dozen more. Ancient systems began drawing power from reactors that had been dormant for more than a century. The hum started so quietly it was almost inaudible, but it grew steadily stronger. Holographic displays materialized in the darkness, their blue glow illuminating the abandoned bridge. Data streamed across screens that no human I had seen in generations. Deep within the ship's core, in a secure vault designed to survive anything short of total destruction, an artificial intelligence opened its consciousness. Terra Contingency Protocol activated. A calm, synthetic voice announced to the empty bridge, analyzing threat parameters. The AI designated Guardian. 7 had been asleep, waiting for this exact moment. Its programming was simple and absolute. If hostile forces entered human territory, while human defensive fleets were out of range, if colonies were threatened with no one close enough to help, then the Ghost Fleet would wake. Guardian. 7 processed the tactical situation in microseconds. The Zalthari Dominion fleet was moving toward 3 populated human worlds. Their formation indicated hostile intent. Their trajectory would put them in orbital bombardment range within 6 hours. And the nearest Terran defense fleet was 16 light-years away. The AI began its work. 16 light-years away on Earth, Lieutenant Commander Vincent Hayes sat at his monitoring station in the Terran Defense Command Center. The room was quiet during the night shift, just a handful of officers watching over humanity's far-flung territories. Then his console erupted with alerts. "Sir," Vincent shouted to the duty officer, "I'm getting a priority alpha signal from Vega Sector." Commander Diane Foster rushed to his station. Her coffee mug clattered onto the desk as she read the alert code. "That's impossible. That's a Terra contingency activation. The Ghost Fleet." Vincent's voice cracked slightly. He'd heard stories about the Ghost Fleet in the Academy, but everyone assumed they were exaggerated war legends. "Get Admiral Brooks on the line. Now." Within minutes, the command center was fully staffed. Admiral Robert Brooks stood before the massive star map, his jaw tight as he studied the situation. The red icon in Vega's sector pulsed ominously. Beside it, 17 smaller icons that had been gray for over a century now glowed amber. "How long until we can get ships there?" Brooks demanded. "Battle Group 7 is the closest," Foster replied. 4 days at maximum FDL speed." "For days." Brooks ran a hand through his gray hair. "Those colonies don't have 4 days if the Dominion decides to bombard." "Sir, the Ghost Fleet is already active," Vincent reported. "Guardian, 7 has full tactical autonomy." Everyone in the room knew what that meant. The Ghost Fleet didn't ask for permission. It didn't wait for orders. It was programmed with one directive: protect human territory by any means necessary. And any means included weapons and tactics that modern humanity had locked away and tried to forget. "Can we communicate with it?" Brooks asked. "We can receive status updates, but we can't override its protocols once it's active." That was the whole point of the contingency. To have a defense that couldn't be stopped by communication lag or hacked command codes. Brooks stared at the map. Those ships had been built during humanity's darkest period, when Earth was fighting brutal wars to unify the colonies. Back when surrender wasn't accepted and mercy was considered a tactical weakness. They'd been decommissioned after the wars ended, supposedly scrapped. But some cautious admiral had kept them, hidden them, turned them into a failsafe. "Send a priority message to the Zalthari Dominion." Brooks ordered. "Tell them to withdraw immediately from Vega Sector." "Sir," "They won't listen. They don't know what they're dealing with." Then God helped them, Brooks said quietly. In the Vega sector, Guardian 7 completed its awakening sequence. Power flowed through conduits that hadn't carried current in generations. Weapon systems came online, their targeting computers updating with data on modern ship designs and defensive technologies. The AI accessed every tactical database, every battle report from the last century, absorbing new information, while its core programming remained unchanged. The other 16 ships of the Ghost Fleet received their activation signals, their own AI systems, simpler than Guardian 7 but just as lethal, synchronized with the flagship. 17 ancient warships began moving in perfect coordination. The Zalthari scout ship detected the power surge immediately. Admiral Kreshtar, the sensor officer, transmitted frantically. The human derelicts are powering up. Their reactors are coming online. Impossible, Kreshtar replied from his position near the colonies. Those ships are centuries old. Sir, their power output is exceeding our dreadnoughts. All 17 vessels are active. Before Kreshtar could respond, every communication channel simultaneously broadcast the same message. It came in 17 languages, translated perfectly, delivered in that same calm synthetic voice. Attention, Zalthari Dominion Fleet. You have violated human territorial space with hostile intent. Terror Contingency Protocol is now active. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures. Failure to comply will result in your complete destruction. This is your only warning. Kreshtar listened to the message, his mandibles clicking in confusion. It's an automated system. Some malfunction triggered by our proximity. Ignore it. The 30 seconds counted down in silence. The Ghost Fleet waited, weapons charged, targeting solutions locked. Guardian 7 tracked every Dominion ship, calculated firing solutions, prepared for combat. The countdown reached 0. The Zalthari fleet continued its approach to the colonies. Guardian 7's assessment was final. Hostile intent confirmed. Threat assessment, maximum. Engaging. The ancient warships opened fire. The first salvo traveled at 90% the speed of light. One moment, Admiral Kreshtar was dismissing the automated warning as a malfunction. The next moment, 3 of his cruisers simply vanished from his tactical display. Not damaged, not disabled, gone, erased from existence in flashes of light. So bright, they temporarily blinded the visual sensors. Report. Kreshtar screamed, all 4 of his arms gripping the command console. Direct hits on cruisers 17, 18, and 19, his tactical officer stammered. Complete hull breaches. No survivors detected. Sir, the projectiles went straight through our quantum shields like they weren't even there. That's impossible. Our shields can disperse any energy weapon in the galaxy. They're not using energy weapons. Admiral, they're using kinetic projectiles. Solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. Kreshtar stared at his officer in disbelief. Kinetic weapons were primitive, outdated. No civilized species had used them in centuries because they were inefficient, required enormous energy to accelerate, and were easy to evade. Except these weren't easy to evade. They were moving so fast that by the time his sensors detected them, they'd already hit. Evasive maneuvers. Kreshtar ordered. All ships scatter formation. Return fire. The Dominion fleet began to move, their powerful engines pushing them into evasive patterns. Their weapons opened up, launching volleys of plasma torpedoes and particle beams at the human ships. The deadly energy streaked through space, enough firepower to level a small moon. The human warships didn't even try to dodge. The weapons hit their hulls dead on, and for a moment, Kreshtar felt hope. But when the light cleared, the ancient vessels were still there. Their armor was glowing hot where the energy had struck, but it was regenerating. The hull material was actually repairing itself, flowing like liquid to seal any damage. What kind of armor is that? Someone whispered on the bridge. The human ships fired again. This time, Kreshtar watched it happen. Massive cannons along their flanks lit up with blue-white energy. The projectiles they launched were huge chunks of tungsten, each one weighing hundreds of tons. But the acceleration was impossible. Physics said you couldn't push that much mass to near light speed without tearing the projectiles apart. For more Dominion ships exploded. The tungsten rounds punched through their shields, their armor, their internal bulkheads, and out the other side, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of debris. "They're not missing," the tactical officer reported, voice shaking. "Every shot is a direct hit. Their targeting is perfect." And it was true. The 17 human warships moved in perfect synchronization, like they were all controlled by a single mind. They never got in each other's firing lines. They never wasted a shot. Each volley eliminated its target with cold efficiency. Kreshtar's fleet outnumbered the humans 3-1, but numbers didn't seem to matter. The Dominion ships were faster, more maneuverable, equipped with the latest quantum shield technology and plasma weapons. But they were fighting an enemy that operated by different rules. Rules written in blood during wars that the galaxy had tried to forget. Deploy countermeasures. Kreshtar ordered desperately. Launch all fighter squadrons. Hundreds of small Zalthari fighters poured from the carrier ships, swarming toward the human vessels. Surely the ancient point defense systems couldn't track that many targets. But as the fighters closed in, strange weapons activated along the human ships' hulls. Ports opened, releasing clouds of what looked like metallic dust. "What is that?" someone asked. The answer came seconds later. The dust cloud touched the lead fighters, and they simply began to disintegrate. Their hulls broke apart at the molecular level, consumed by something that ate metal like acid ate flesh. The entire fighter wing dissolved into floating debris within 30 seconds. "Nanites," the science officer whispered in horror. "They're using military nanites." Military nanite weapons had been banned by the Galactic Convention for 300 years. They were considered too dangerous, too uncontrollable. But these humans had built their ships before those conventions existed, before the galaxy had agreed on civilized warfare. Another weapon fired. This one Kreshtar couldn't even see until it hit. Two of his dreadnoughts suddenly crumpled inward, their hulls crushing like paper. The ships collapsed into themselves, crew and equipment compressed into balls of twisted metal no bigger than small asteroids. "Gravitational lance," the science officer reported, his voice barely audible. "They're weaponizing gravity fields." That technology was supposed to be theoretical. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible. But the human ships had reactors that were outputting power levels that should have triggered containment failures. Everything about these vessels violated what the galaxy knew about engineering and physics. "Transmit surrender codes." Kreshtar shouted. "All frequencies. Tell them we're withdrawing." His communications officer's hands flew across the controls. The surrender message broadcast in every known language, including human standard. It was a universal signal that combat was over, that the defeated side was yielding. The response came back in that same calm, synthetic voice. "Surrender protocols not recognized. Threat assessment remains at 73%. Continuing engagement until threat is eliminated." "They're not stopping," the communications officer said, voice breaking. "They don't accept surrender." Kreshtar felt ice in his blood. These weren't modern warships with crew who could show mercy or restraint. They were automated killing machines, programmed with a single objective: destroy threats to human territory. And their programming defined a threat as any hostile ship still capable of combat. Full retreat. Kreshtar ordered emergency FTL jumps. Every ship for themselves. The Dominion fleet broke formation, ships jumping to faster-than-light speed in random directions. They left behind 23 destroyed vessels, thousands of dead crew, and a sector now firmly under the control of 17 ancient human warships. The Ghost fleet held position, weapons still charged, waiting to see if any enemies would return. Guardian. 7 calculated the battle results. Hostile fleet reduced by 68%, remaining vessels fleeing at maximum speed, human colonies unthreatened. Mission parameters achieved. The ancient warships began a methodical sweep of the sector, hunting down every Dominion probe, every surveillance buoy, every escape pod. Anything that could report back on human capabilities was systematically destroyed. No witnesses, no intelligence for the enemy. The Ghost Fleet had sent its message, written in fire and death. And the message was simple. Humanity might have grown civilized, but they never forgot how to wage total war. The Zalthari science vessel Seeker Truth tumbled through space, its engines barely functioning. Captain Bradley Cole, a human xenohistorian who'd been working with the Dominion for the past 5 years, pulled himself to the communications console. His hands were shaking. "This is Seeker of Truth to any Terran defense frequency," he transmitted frantically. "Please respond. This is an emergency." The response came within seconds. "This is TDF monitoring station Olympus 9. We read you, Seeker. State your emergency." "The Ghost Fleet," Bradley gasped. "They're real. They're active. And they just destroyed 2/3 of the Dominion Expeditionary Force." There was a long pause on the other end. When the voice returned, it belonged to someone different, older, more authoritative. "This is Admiral Robert Brooks. Repeat that last statement." The derelict fleet in Vega sector came to life. "Admiral." They didn't just activate. They fought. And they used weapons I've only read about in classified historical documents. Weapons that were supposed to be banned. "How many Dominion casualties?" Bradley checked his damage sensors. 23 ships destroyed. Thousands dead. The survivors are fleeing in every direction. "Admiral, you have to recall those ships. They're not following any rules of engagement. They won't accept surrender. They just keep killing until nothing's left." Another voice came on the line. Lieutenant Amy Foster from the monitoring station. "Captain Cole, the Ghost Fleet doesn't have recall protocols during active engagement. Those protocols were deliberately removed to prevent enemies from hacking the command codes. Then override them. Send shutdown commands." "We can't. Once Terra contingency activates, those ships are fully autonomous until they determine the threat is neutralized. That's the entire point of the system." Bradley slumped in his chair. Through his viewport, he could see the distant flashes of light as the Ghost Fleet methodically hunted down the remaining Dominion presence in the sector. Every escape pod, every damaged ship, every surveillance drone. They were being erased systematically. Aboard the UNSC Indomitable, Guardian, 7 continued its work with cold precision. The AI processed tactical data through neural networks that were ancient by modern standards, but optimized for a single purpose. Its programming had been written during humanity's unification wars, when Earth's fledgling colonies had fought each other with brutality that made the current galactic conflicts look gentle. Guardian, 7 knew 147 different ways to destroy a starship. It had used 32 of them in the last hour. Deploying fusion mines, the AI announced the empty bridge. Target, Dominion Surveillance Network. Small spheres launched from the Indomitable's hull, drifting toward the sector's star. When they reached optimal position, they detonated. But these weren't normal explosions. The mines triggered fusion reactions in stellar wind itself, creating cascading waves of energy that fried every electronic device within 1,000,000 kilometers. The entire Dominion surveillance grid went dark in an instant. Back on the Seeker of Truth, Bradley accessed his personal database of galactic history. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he searched for information about these ships. What he found made his blood run cold. The Ghost Fleet had been built during what historians called the Dark Decade of human expansion. 10 years when Earth's colonies had fought wars of unprecedented brutality. No prisoners were taken. No quarter was given. Entire stations had been destroyed with everyone aboard. The fighting had been so savage that when it finally ended, humanity had collectively agreed to lock away the weapons they created and never speak them again. "They're not just warships," Bradley muttered, reading through classified files. "They're genocide machines." He transmitted his findings to Olympus 9. "Admiral Brooks, I'm sending you historical data on the Ghost Fleet. These ships fought in the Battle of Titan's Rest, where 40,000 people died in 6 hours. They were at the Siege of New Harmony, where they reduced an entire moon to rubble. They were designed for total war. No survivors. No mercy." Brooks' voice was grim when he responded. "We know their history, Captain Cole. That's why they were supposed to stay asleep. But you invaded human territory. You threatened colonies. The contingency did exactly what it was designed to do. Those ships have killed thousands of people. And they'll kill thousands more if anyone else decides to test human borders, Brooks replied. That's the point. The Ghost Fleet isn't meant to fight fair. It's meant to be so terrifying that no one dares to attack us when we're vulnerable. Bradley watched his sensors as another Dominion ship, tried to hide in an asteroid field, was methodically hunted down and destroyed. The human warships moved through the debris like sharks, their sensors missing nothing. How many of these fleets do you have? He asked quietly. Brooks was silent for a moment. The Terra contingency includes 40 separate deployments scattered throughout human space. Each one contains between 15 and 20 vessels. Each one is programmed to activate if human colonies are threatened while our defensive fleets are out of range. Bradley did the math. 800 warships. 800 automated killing machines that would wake up and slaughter anyone who threatened humanity's territory. It was the most terrifying defensive strategy he'd ever heard of. You're telling the galaxy that if they attack you, they'll face total war. We're telling the galaxy that our mercy has limits, Brooks corrected. Modern humanity fights with honor. We follow conventions. We accept surrender. We treat prisoners well. But if you push us when we're defenseless, if you threaten civilians when our fleets are too far away to help, then you meet the humans we used to be. And those humans don't believe in mercy. Guardian 7 completed its final sweep of the sector. Every hostile presence had been eliminated. Every surveillance device was destroyed. The 3 human colonies remained untouched, their populations completely unaware of how close they had come to orbital bombardment. Threat assessment, 3% remaining, the AI calculated. Acceptable parameters. Returning to standby mode. The Ghost Fleet moved back into formation, their weapons powering down, their systems beginning the shutdown sequence. Within hours, they would look like derelicts again. Dead ships floating in space. Harmless relics from a forgotten war. But now everyone knew the truth. They weren't relics. They were promises. Promises written in tungsten and fire that humanity's capacity for violence hadn't disappeared. It had simply been put to sleep, waiting for the moment it was needed again. For days after the battle, Admiral Rebecca Brooks stood on the bridge of the TDF carrier Valiant, watching the Ghost Fleet through the main view screen. The 17 ancient warships hung in their original formation, looking once again like abandoned hulks, scorched, silent, lifeless. But Rebecca knew better now. Everyone knew better. Ma'am, we're receiving the final combat report from Guardians 7. Commander Kyle Mitchell reported from the tactical station. Hostile fleet engagement. 94% efficiency rating. Human casualties. 0. Colony infrastructure damage. 0. Collateral civilian casualties. 0. Rebecca let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. At least it protected what was supposed to protect. Admiral, the Marines are requesting permission to deploy the Honor Guard. She nodded slowly. Permission granted. Those ships earned it. 20 minutes later, 200 Terra Marines in dress uniform formed ranks in front of the Indomitable. They stood at attention in their combat shuttles, a traditional salute to warriors who had defended humanity. Even though those warriors were machines, even though their methods had been brutal, they had done their duty when no one else could. Rebecca opened a channel to the fleet. This is Admiral Brooks to all hands. We're here because 17 ships did what they were built to do. They protected human lives when we were too far away. They fought so that 8 million colonists could wake up safe this morning. Whatever you think about their methods, remember that. Deep within the Indomitable Guardian, 7 received the transmission. The AI processed the words, added them to its database, and prepared its final task. Before it turned to sleep, it had one more message to send. Every Zalthari military frequency suddenly crackled to life. Every Dominion command ship, every outpost, every communication relay received the same transmission simultaneously. It was broadcasting on channels that the Dominion thought were encrypted and secure. The ease with which the human AI had cracked their codes was itself a message. This is Guardian 7 of the United Nations Space Command Ghost Fleet. The calm synthetic voice began. This transmission is directed to all foreign powers operating near human territorial space. In the Dominion capital, the High Council gathered in emergency session to hear the message. Admiral Kreshtar stood before them, his career in ruins, forced to explain how he lost 23 ships to vessels that were supposedly obsolete. You have witnessed one Ghost Fleet deployment activate and engage hostile forces. Guardian 7 continued. You should know that this deployment is one of 40 scattered throughout human space. Each deployment contains between 15 and 20 vessels. Each is programmed to activate when human colonies are threatened and our defensive fleets cannot respond in time. The Dominion counselors looked at each other in alarm. 40 fleets, 800 warships, hidden throughout human territory, waiting to wake up. Modern humanity has adopted civilized warfare protocols. The AI's voice explained. We follow the galactic conventions. We accept surrender. We treat prisoners with dignity. We wage limited wars with rules and restraints. This is not weakness. This is choice. On Earth, in the Terran Defense Command Center, Lieutenant Vincent Hayes listened to broadcasts with a mixture of pride and unease. The Ghost Fleet was telling the entire galaxy about humanity's nuclear option. It was a deterrent, but it was also a threat. The Terra contingency represents humanity's capacity for total war. Guardian 7 stated, "We built these ships during our darkest period, when survival meant absolute victory and defeat meant extinction. We have moved beyond that era. We have grown. We have learned restraint. But we have not forgotten how to fight without restraint." In the Zalthari High Council chambers, one of the counselors spoke up. "This is a direct threat. We should demand these weapons be decommissioned immediately." But Kreshtar, standing before them with his career destroyed and thousands of his crew dead, shook his head. "You don't understand. We can't force them to do anything. We tried to take their territory when their fleets were away. We thought they were vulnerable. We were wrong." Guardian 7's message continued across the galaxy. These ships will remain in position. They will remain dormant until activated by threat protocols. If you respect human territorial integrity, you will never know they exist. If you choose to test our boundaries, you will discover what humanity was like before we learned mercy. The transmission paused, and when it resumed, the AI's voice carried a weight that made even digital words sound ominous. "This is not a warning to provoke fear. This is a promise of consequences. Attack our colonies when our fleets are distant, and you will not face modern humanity. You will face the humans we used to be." And those humans believed that the best defense was to ensure the attacker never threatened anyone again. The broadcast ended. Silence filled command centers across a dozen species territories. 2 weeks later, the Zalthari Dominion formally requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. They demanded the immediate decommissioning of all Ghost Fleet deployments. They called the ships violations of every convention on automated weapons and proportional response. Ambassador Helen Ross sat in the human delegation box, listening to the Dominion's impassioned speeches about the dangers of autonomous warships. When it was finally her turn to speak, she stood calmly and approached the central podium. "The Ghost Fleet will not be decommissioned," she stated simply. "These ships stay exactly where they are." The chamber erupted in protests. The Dominion ambassador raised all four arms. "You're telling us you'll keep weapons of mass destruction on automatic triggers throughout your space?" Helen's expression was pleasant, but her eyes were cold. "I'm telling you that humanity learned a hard lesson centuries ago. We learned that peace isn't maintained by being weak. It's maintained by being strong enough that others think twice before attacking. Those ships slaughtered thousands. Those ships defended 3 colonies that you were about to bombard," Helen replied. "Let me be absolutely clear about something. Modern humanity is civilized. We follow rules. We show mercy. We believe in proportional response and diplomatic solutions. But that civilization is built on a foundation of strength. The Ghost Fleet is that foundation." She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. "You want to know how far humanity could be pushed? Those 17 ships are your answer. Push us when we're strong, and you'll face our fleets, our diplomats, our willingness to negotiate and compromise. Push us when we're vulnerable. when our colonies are defenseless and our fleets are too far away, and you'll meet something very different. This is barbaric, someone shouted from the gallery. No, Helen said quietly. Barbaric was what the Dominion planned to do to those colonies. The Ghost Fleet simply ensured it couldn't happen. And now everyone knows that human mercy is a choice we make, not a weakness you can exploit. The vote was called. The motion to force decommissioning failed. Not unanimously, but by a wide enough margin to make the message clear. The galaxy had decided that humanity could keep its sleeping guardians. In the Vega sector, the Ghost Fleet remained in formation. Their hulls were dark and cold once more. Their weapons were silent. They looked like nothing more than ancient relics, monuments to wars long past. But now the galaxy knew the truth. Those ships weren't museums. They were promises. They were reminders that humanity's capacity for total war hadn't disappeared. It had simply been put to sleep, and it would wake again if anyone was foolish enough to test it.